So it's kind of an open secret that Apple's gonna be moving away from Intel because they've been running little hot lately, and Apple's very good at designing their own silicon, as they've proven with their iPhone and iPad launches, and the blazing fast Apple Watch Series 4 and Series 5, I guess, but same chip. Apple wants to bring their own custom-designed CPUs to the Mac using the ARM architecture, which means moving away from the x86 architecture we've had for so long. And given I think that launch is just about a year away, probably around the October-November 2020 timeframe, could be wrong, but that's where I'm guessing it's gonna happen. I thought today would be a good time to do a video on it because there's a lot of people that have asked me several times whether or not they think it's a good idea to get the big boy 16-inch MacBook Pro, because lots of YouTubers seem to be saying nice things about it. Thermal situation seems to be improving. Speakers sound good. I can eat Cheetos over the keyboard again. So is now a good time to upgrade, or should I wait for the ARM-based MacBook? So in today's video, I'll tell you why you probably shouldn't wait, but it'll make more sense. So let's begin. Now, we've been talking about this leak for, honestly, years. I remember as far back as 2018, reading reports that Apple would switch to their own custom-built CPUs in their Macs by the end of 2020. So, as far as we're concerned, those leaks are still probably accurate if Apple's on track to start switching away from Intel in their machines by the end of next year. The reason I don't think it's going to happen in the first half of 2020 is because we probably would have seen some type of announcement / allusion to it within macOS code, and given there's been no real references to an ARM-based MacBook within macOS Catalina, that's why I think it'll make the most sense for Apple to announce that they're making the big switch over at Worldwide Developers Conference in 2020. It could go a couple of ways. They might unveil a new MacBook that is powered by Apple's first CPU. Maybe it'll be branded something else, like M1 chip because it's for the Mac, or MB chip for a MacBook. I guess the motion processors already have an M. There's too many different types of Apple silicon. We got H1, W1, the A series of chips, the S series of chips. There's probably more, but I can't think of more. But they'll call it something, let's just say B chips. So the B1 chip, which will be Apple designed, will launch on a MacBook next year. But I think it's possible they may not unveil the actual hardware at Worldwide Developers Conference. And similar to what Steve Jobs did back when they unveiled they were switching to Intel, they'll just kind of let developers know and tell third parties like, hey, you better start redesigning your apps and optimizing them for the ARM architecture, because once the next version of macOS, not Catalina, but the following one, whatever they decide to call it, I'm hoping for macOS Weed. It was a really good idea, Craig. Stick with it. So when macOS Weed launches, that's probably around the time frame they'll launch this new ARM-based powered MacBook, and you're probably all asking the same thing. Is it a MacBook Pro? Is it a MacBook Air? That's too far into the future for us to truly know, but personally, I think it's gonna be some type of low-powered, low-end, ultra-portable MacBook. The CPUs on the latest MacBook Pros with their 6 cores and 8 cores are running pretty well, and they can handle quite a lot of awesome processing power for when you're editing or running Fortnite, as we know all MacBook Pro users are, and of course running Minecraft with 3 chunks. They're doing okay, but what needs the Apple designed CPUs, that in-house design chip that can allow for much better CPU and GPU performance at a very power efficient rate, are the low-end MacBooks. So this is a bit of a stretch, but I think they will revamp the 12-inch MacBook. Yeah, I see through all this Apple chunk designing with the Magic Keyboard coming back and the laptops getting heavier and thicker. I know deep down Apple still truly cares about thin and light notebooks. I don't think they've completely abandoned that idea that the 12-inch MacBook set out to be, which was a thin, light, super portable laptop. It didn't have any fans in it, so yeah, performance on it was garbage, but that wasn't the point of its existence. It was just supposed to be light, good to type on, do basic laptop things. But yeah, if you wanted anything even remotely power intensive, better get a MacBook Air or MacBook Pro. So it's also possible that the first Mac with the ARM-based CPU could be a relaunched MacBook Air, but it'll be one of those two. I don't think they'll launch it on a redesigned MacBook Pro, because I think they want to test it on something thin and light so that Apple can showcase, hey, with this machine, it doesn't even need fans on the inside, just like an iPad Pro, and because it's ARM, it can run cool enough that it can still do very power-intensive tasks with pretty good performance, because I imagine it would be on par with the iPad Pro A12X chip, except this is a year from now, so probably more on par are with the A13X chip, which was probably going to be really impressive, except now you're going to be running a desktop operating system with that chip. The iPad Pro A12X chip is really fast and really powerful, but it can only run things off of iPadOS, which is still good apps and stuff, but once more third parties, and I'm sure Apple will optimize their apps for first-party support, that's when you'll start being able to run apps like Logic or Final Cut Pro or Xcode using Apple-designed silicon. But yes, this will fundamentally change a lot of macOS. Because we know the Apple Silicon team does such a good job with optimization, making things power efficient and still providing maximum performance like they have with the iPhones and iPads, the biggest limitation of the ARM-based MacBook is not going to be performance, or I don't even think thermal throttling. I think the main drawback is going to be app support. There's only a couple of ways you can go about running x86 apps on an ARM-based machine, which may involve using emulators. So Apple may have to run older unoptimized apps in an emulator, which may sacrifice in performance in several ways. And I also imagine a lot of third-party applications that don't like putting their apps on the Mac App Store or optimizing their apps on day one. There's probably good potential that the first ARM-based MacBook will not run all of those third-party apps at launch. But over time, hopefully, I think they'll move over and they'll start optimizing their apps. But an extreme limitation of this first Apple-designed CPU MacBook is that it may not be able to run third-party apps like Steam or the Adobe Suite at launch day. It will still probably run Apple-designed apps. I bet that's how they'll showcase it. You know, if you really care about using Logic Pro or Xcode or Final Cut, those will probably be optimized for the ARM architecture, which means you'll probably be able to get really decent Final Cut video editing performance or audio editing or coding performance with a very thin and light MacBook. Probably one that doesn't even have a fan on it because the CPU is running so cool and so power efficient that it'll also probably maintain a fairly decent battery life. So what you're looking at is the backbones of the iPad Pro, except with the user input of macOS with a keyboard and mouse. In regards to how the display works and the I/O, that kind of stuff, it's too early to tell, but we do know that Apple has been moving away from Intel. That was a super intentional rhyme. And eventually, I'm sure Apple wants to convert the entire Mac lineup to their own custom CPUs, but keep in mind, that's not going to happen overnight. So if you're in the market for like a $2,500 MacBook Pro because you need a lot of performance, I definitely think it's not too early to invest in the 16-inch because it's probably going to be years and years down the road until Apple actually starts making CPUs that can rival the performance of these higher 6 to 8 core i9 chips. They're probably going to start off with a machine that really is in need of performance, like the 12-inch MacBook or like the MacBook Air, and then later down the road start working on the really power-intensive stuff like the MacBook Pros, and then probably start implementing their own custom chip, the B4, the B5 chip. That'll go in the iMacs later, and eventually, probably 5 to 6 years from now, maybe they'll even revamp the Mac Pro to be ARM-based. But the fact that Apple hasn't even launched the Mac Pro at the time of recording this, and that one's not built around ARM-based CPUs at all, shows that this is going to be a long-term process. This is not something that Apple's just gonna switch overnight. Oh, okay, everything's ARM-based now, optimize your apps, or you're not gonna get as much support as before. Apple's trying to move everyone along, and a lot of third-party developers probably aren't gonna optimize their apps, but the ones that do, you're gonna see some pretty awesome performance with a fairly light and probably really decent battery life machine. I'm very excited for that. Could end up being wrong about all of this. That's totally possible, in which case I will just delete my channel and start over. I think that's a fair way to do it. But let me know what you think of the ARM-based MacBook. If you're curious of my thoughts on the 16-inch MacBook Pro, hold your horses, set a timer on your watch, use that stupid Breathe app, and calm down because I gotta use the machine for a few more days before I give my full in-depth review. I didn't get this thing early, okay? Apple's not as friendly to me. Just because I'm the Apple sheep doesn't mean I get to receive things early in the mail, alright? I will get over it. It's fine. Apple, you just don't love me. You want to put my podcast in your commercial, but you don't want to give me stuff early. Well, hey, I didn't give you permission to put my podcast in your commercial. Whatever. This is your Apple sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.